Welcome to this celebration of 30 years of the T.S. Eliot Prize, a prize that places language at the centre of our culture and places poetry at the epicentre, if you can have an epicentre near a centre, because I think you can. Mind you, I would say that because I'm a poet.
It's a culmination of a career. It's not the end of the career, but it's a culmination. It's a point where I think, okay, I'm okay. I know what I'm doing, and other people are recognizing what I'm doing as well. So it's vindication in a lot of ways.
All these books, all those times spent sitting, reading the books and thinking about poetry and making poetry into something that actually encompasses more than you thought it would. Whether you sat on the bus, sat waiting for a bus, getting off the bus. Actually, I don't recommend reading poetry when you're getting off a bus unless it's metaphorical.
It's an overwhelming feeling. And it goes back to that feeling of belonging I was talking about earlier. Because people like us, we don't get things like this. And it's a really magnificent thing.
I'm sitting next to a stack of all the winners from the last 30 years. And when you see them, you realise that these aren't just winners for the year they won, or for the year before, or for the year after, but they ripple out. They've got resonance. These are winners for all time. Sit and read them. Sit and read the ones that won 30 years ago. Sit and read the ones that won last year and think about them. And you realise, as I do, that the more you read these winners, the more they become part of you. The more you build yourself around them and they build themselves around you. So what a stack of books this really is.
Being nominated for the T.S. Eliot Prize is amazing. Like, just a recognition of peers, and also like I'm a massive fan of T.S. Eliot, 4 quartets in particular. You know, I mean, a lot of people like Wasteland, but 4 quartets is my jam.
In these troubled times, the T.S. Eliot Prize reminds us how important poetry is. People are finding that. People are finding that poetry helps them to relocate their own voice, to relocate themselves in the world. That reading poetry, that absorbing poetry helps us to make sense of the nonsensical and senseless things that are happening around us.
If every kid in the world could, when they first go to school, write poems and dance and do music and write stories, we would be living in a very different and a much better world.
So the prize is vital, the prize is important, the prize shines like a jewel, not only in the poetry world, but across the entire world. I've been told that the T.S. Eliot Prize is one of the few things that can be seen from space, and thank goodness for that.
Good evening, everyone. We are the current judges of this year's T.S. Eliot Prize, and in the tradition of T.S. Eliot, we're going to read a game of chess. The chair she sat in, like a burnished throne, glowed on the marble where the glass held up by standards wrought with fruited vines, from which a golden Cupidon peeped out. Another hid his eyes behind his wing, doubled the flames of 7-branch candelabra, reflecting light upon the table as the glitter of her jewels rose to meet it. From satin cases poured in rich profusion, in vials of ivory and coloured glass unstoppered, lurked her strange synthetic perfumes, unguent, powdered or liquid, troubled, confused, and drowned the scents in odours, stirred by the air that freshened from the window. These ascended in fattening the prolonged candle flames, flung their smoke into the laccaria, stirring the pattern on the coffered ceiling.
Huge sea wood, fed with copper, burned green and orange, framed by the coloured stone, in which sad light a carved dolphin swam. Above the antique mantel was displayed, as though a window gave upon the sylvan scene, the change of Philomel by the barbarous king so rudely forced. Yet there the nightingale filled all the desert with inviolable voice, and still she cried, and still the world pursues, jug, jug, to dirty ears. And other withered stumps of time were told upon the walls. Staring forms leaned out, leaning, hushing the room enclosed. Footsteps shuffled on the stair. Under the firelight, under the brush, her hair spread out in fiery points, glowed into words, then would be savagely still.
My nerves are bad tonight. Yes, bad. Stay with me. Speak to me. Why do you never speak? Speak. What are you thinking of? What thinking? What? I never know what you are thinking. Think.
I think we are in Rat's Alley, where the dead men lost their bones.
What is that noise?
The wind under the door.
What is that noise now? What is the wind doing?
Nothing. Again, nothing.
Do you know nothing? Do you see nothing? Do you remember nothing?
I remember those are pearls that were his eyes.
Are you alive or not? Is there nothing in your head?
But oh, that Shakespearean rag, it's so elegant, so intelligent.
What shall I do now? What shall I do?
I shall rush out as I am and walk the street with my hair down so. What shall we do tomorrow? What shall we ever do?
The hot water at 10, and if it rains, a closed car at 4. And we shall play a game of chess, pressing lidless eyes and waiting for a knock upon the door.
When Lil's husband got demobbed, I didn't mince my words. I said to her myself,
Hurry up, please, it's time.
now Albert's coming back, make yourself a bit smart. He'll want to know what you've done with that money he gave you to get yourself some teeth. He did. I was there. You have them all out, Lil. Get a nice set, he said. I swear I can't bear to look at you. And no more can't I said. And think of poor Albert. He's been in the army 4 years and he wants a good time. And if you don't give it him, there's others will, I said. Oh, is there? She said. Something of that, I said. Then I'll know who to thank, she said, and give me a straight look.
Hurry up, please, it's time.
If you don't like it, you can get on with it, I said. Others can pick and choose if you can't, but if Albert makes off, it won't be for lack of telling. You ought to be ashamed, I said, to look so antique.
and her only 31.
I can't help it, she said, pulling a long face. It's them pills I took to bring it off, she said.
She's had 5 already and nearly died of young George.
The chemist said it would be all right, but I've never been the same. You are a proper fool, I said. Well, if Albert won't leave you alone, there it is, I said. What'd you get married for if you don't want children?
Hurry up, please. It's time.
Well, that Sunday, Albert was home. They had a hot gammon, and they asked me into dinner to get the beauty of it hot.
Hurry up, please. It's time. Hurry up, please. It's time.
Good night, Bill.
Good night, Lou.
Good night, May.
Good night.
Ta-ta.
Good night. Good night.
Good night, ladies. Good night, sweet ladies. Good night. Good night.
Thank you very much to Paul Muldoon, Denise Saul and Sasha Dugdale reading those words of T.S. Eliot. Welcome along to this annual trip in the poetry spaceship that never loses its power, that flies all over the place and lands everywhere it wants to. That's the great thing about this year. This is the 30th anniversary of the T.S. Eliot Prize. I've been presenting these readings for 45 years. That's not true. I made that up. So the great thing about tonight's T.S. Eliot is that it's part of a hub. It's a hub that's growing. We've got readers' notes. We've got writers' notes. We've got some young critics from the Poetry Society writing and thinking about the books. We've also got live streaming, and we know that several T.S. Eliot Prize parties are happening all over the country. Several T.S. Eliot lookalikes have been hired to sit in a corner looking happy. That's not true again, but wouldn't it be great if it was? People are sitting around in a kind of the way they think that T.S. Eliot might sit at a party. Who knows? Legs crossed quite high, glasses steaming up with the excitement. Yes, that's what's happening. So I mustn't forget to mention the books are on sale in the interval and at the end. That's a change from last year. Last year the books weren't on sale in the interval, so several people tried to buy things that weren't there and went home with tables and chairs. So this year the books are on sale in the interval and at the end. So tonight we have our 10 shortlisted winners, our shortlisters. The winner gets £25,000. This year, £7.23 due to inflation, obviously, but this year we thought we might pay them in 50p pieces, just so it looks like a lot more than it is. So £1,500 for the 10 shortlistees, £25,000 for the winner announced tomorrow night. So tonight, each of our 10 shortlisters will read for an infinite amount of time, or as we call it, 7 minutes. But it feels infinite because it has a kind of infinite depth when they read. When they come off, they say, was that 7 minutes? You go, yes, it was. They say, it felt like a lifetime in a good way. It can feel like a lifetime in a bad way. I've been asked to say that we're not allowed to clap after the poems, but we can clap at the end. You can clap telepathically after the poems. You can do things like bringing your hands almost together, but not quite. But at the end, we're allowed to clap, whoop, and smack our thighs. Anybody's thighs, obviously. So, our first reader is the wonderful Eiléan Ní Chuilleanáin, whose book, The Map of the World, there are 3 lines in it that kept coming back to me the more I read it. I thought of the nets of language, how they float past each other. And it struck me that those 3 lines are a challenge to the book and a challenge to us all as readers. Because what this book does is it says that actually the nets of language that are cast don't float past each other in this book. The nets of language that are cast get tangled up with each other in a wonderful way, so that sometimes tangling is a bad thing. But in this book, the tangling is a fantastic thing. I was reading the book, and my 7-year-old grandson, Noah, said, you seem to have read that book several times, Grandad. I said, yes, I'm doing what they call close reading. He said, how close do you have to get? I said, as close as possible. And he said, you sometimes have to hold it that close. I said, yes, you do, so that somehow, even by holding the book close to you, the book imprints itself on your head, metaphorically, which is what we hope all these books tonight will do. Please welcome Elaine.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be reading first, because then I can listen to the other people. I'm going to read a poem which is not quite the title poem of this collection. It's called Air, the Map of the World. It was written in memory of the musician Mícheál Ó Súilleabháin, and in the songbooks of my childhood, the songs were introduced by telling you what popular air the song was to be sung to. I don't believe there is a tune called The Map of the World. The map had told us already what would happen to the peoples of the West. Long promontories hurrying them out into the salty ocean fields, roads that twisted around inlets, constantly promising a place to rest. And yet invention does not falter. Just feel the tailor's clutch of the variously woven tweeds, ready for the scissors, the tacking, the silky lining. Listen, as the echoes are twisting into a macaronic language, listen to the places we came from, their stories elbowing each other out of the way. Can you recall the dripping walls of the library, the lads who were thought to be studying grammar to prepare for Maynooth, but instead they were planning their forays across the plains of Argentina? Up comes the prophecy I heard in the train, making the slow journey from Fishguard as far as the junction, when the big woman with red hair in the green and white dress with a gold belt and red shoes told us over and over, "They don't come back from America, they comes back from England, not America. They never comes back." And along the carriage, a man was playing an accordion. The cards were slapped down on suitcases. Do we not know about those journeys now, or how the accordion's long note spoke up in agreement, so that I could never have recalled her voice except for that music, its delays and provisos dividing up the time? This one is called Seasons of the Lemon House. The shadows in the lemon house hinted a place of refuge, their semitones of light carefully inclining along the downward curve, pausing on a twilight verge. The high, dim, glazed frames gently allowing the light inside. In the Shrovetide frost, they kept their counsel. Now on the edge, where climates shift, spilling across the map, the lemon trees are safe, herding together, brushing twigs and leaves, the fruits floating under the ruffled skirts, shining yellow as ever. The heavy pots of clay, readied for the move outside, are not yet stirring at their slow procession, their wheels complaining. I thought of the nets of language, how they float past each other, never engaging. They lie side by side, a shallow tidal zone between. Codes of work and home, one basks and the other shivers. Light, then dark. The order is not spoken yet, the knife still in the sailor's pocket. Then, cut it. The knitted flesh tight inside, segmented like the compass rose. By July, we will have forgotten the word for frost. And I'm going to read two more poems, and it's worth saying, I suppose, that both of them were written and published in 2021, so they don't actually belong to the dreadful things that are happening in the world at the moment. except, of course, that they do. The first one is called What Happened Next. So, will we ever be told what happened afterwards to the man who had fallen among thieves as he went down from Jerusalem to Jericho, half killed? What happened to him after the Samaritan paid for his care at the inn? Or what became of the women in Naples in 1944 who sold rough sex to soldiers in public for food, their faces never changing as they took it? How can I even ask? Who would I ask? Indeed, it was never the point of the story. Fiction or truth, it will be told again. This happened in my lifetime in a place that I know. The moment the light falls on the victim and then it moves away slowly, the light that also falls when there's nobody there to see it. When I begin the telling, the words will not be quiet. I have to lie down beside them and listen to the crackling syllables that keep beginning again each time the wheel of language spins. But they never tell what happened after the ending. They have so many stories, and not all have been heard already, and not all of them can tell us clearly what we ought to have done. And the last poem is called Wartime. The convent now is full of women down on their luck. Abandoned wives, mothers-in-law, nieces and daughters of men who needed to vanish for a while. Avoiding each other, waiting, reading a little, or sometimes wasting an hour drafting a letter, they slip upstairs to dig in backpacks, hunting for the last envelope with a real address. Where do they all sleep? The young ones camp in the refectory under the frescoed arch. The girl who's finished in boarding school has nowhere to go now. Her home is beyond the new border. She practices scales on the tablecloth, breathing in 4/4 time. Then she begins the concerto, first with a gallop, then a long pause, counting the bars, her fingers held up in the air. It is time. The women have drifted singly down along the short path leading to the chapel. The sisters' voices heard as the door opens, a brief crescendo. At the edge of the table, she waits until a sign from her dead music mistress tells her to bring the spread fingers down. She holds the chord in place, pressing her foot into the floor, the note sinking into time, the time that's lost, the note so much older than the hand that conjures, filling the empty room. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elaine. Well restrained with the applause there. That was good. People were dying to clap, but you didn't. That was almost moving. It's great when you hear and you realise that, in fact, what the poets have is all that the rest of us have. They've got the alphabet, and they've got punctuation, and they've got white space at the edge of the poem, and they've got the air, and they've got breath. And that's what they have. That's their basic tools, their basic building blocks. And yet, as we'll see tonight, what different edifices they build from those building blocks in a very, very moving way, I think. If you want to see more of those films, like the one that we were in at the start, if you look on the T.S. Eliot Foundation website, who generously sponsor the prize, you'll see quite a lot more of the films. So please take your time with those. Take your time. I've just heard that one T.S. Eliot lookalike has had to go from one party to another. He's double booked himself with 2 parties. People kept shouting, "Hurry up, please, it's time," as he left to go to the next party. I think it depends when you first read a book, when you read it. I think you have to try and read a book over sometimes a single sitting with a poetry book. That's what I did with Joe Carrick-Varty's amazing book, More Sky. I started reading it quite late at night, and the bloke next door was having a party. So I thought, he'll not be going to bed tonight, so I may as well stop up and read the book. And that's what I did. And it kind of, the night became a bit lighter and a bit lighter as the night went on, and it mirrored this astonishing book, which in one sense is about masculinity, it's about the North, it's about language, it's about suicide, it's about how we use language to describe these things that sometimes can feel absolutely indescribable. You get phrases like, suicide slinks off stage left, crouches at the other end of the ocean. Suicide was the sky above a demolished building. And Joe Carrick-Varty is a poet who trains his poet's eye on things that don't often get written about and makes sure that, like that night that I spent reading his book, it gradually gets lighter with a kind of understanding, I think. Joe Carrick-Varty.
Blimey. This is a glass of Pinot Noir. My friend Boyega Odebanjo loved Pinot Noir, and he passed away last year. And since he passed, I've been doing things without him for the first time. And coming to this event is one of the things I've never done without him. So I need to pour a drink out for him now, which I didn't spill. So yeah, this is for Boyega. I love you, I miss you, and I hope that you're proud of me. Yeah. It's funny, and this is not to diss the poets. Last year, when we came to this event, in the kind of weeks afterwards, we sat right there and we drank. He basically rocked up late, right? So I was waiting for him for like 20 minutes, and he rocked up late with a bottle of Pinot Noir under his jacket, and we sat right there and drank the bottle and watched the poets. And in the week afterwards, chatting about the event, the only thing we could really remember was Ian. Who is apparently the star of the show. So I'm going to read some poems now and then fade into the collective memory, in your collective memory. Basically, just we're going to remember Ian and not me. So this poem is about buying shoes for my father. It's called Sambas for Christmas. In a corner of some far-flung town, on some moon, of some planet, at the edge of some pocketed galaxy, the souls of my father's new trainers are landing on tarmac, squeaking as they take off again, box fresh at the end of his faded black jeans. They will squeak for a week or so, and then he will die on his back in his sleep, like Jimi Hendrix after a night at a pub that's not quite my local, whistling as he stumbles home, running his fingers through a rosemary bush awash in the chippy's neon blue. Believe for a minute that I am not a son who buys trainers for his father, but a molecule of gas inside a star whose light still touches a city that's not quite Oxford, where a father who's not quite mine tries on pairs of Adidas, Nike, struggling with the laces, the incomprehensible bow. So I used to be a postie, And being a postie is a great job, you know, it's a good job. I have an anecdote I'm going to tell you, but I'm forgetting it as I'm speaking. One of the great things about being a postie, or one of the funny things about being a postie, I should say, are the notes that people leave on their door. Like, you might leave on your door when you've gone to the shop and you want the postie to leave the parcel in the wheelie bin, more or less, normally, but these notes, you have no idea how exuberant these notes can become. So, this poem is written in the form of one of those notes. It's called Dear Postie. Dear Postie, if no answer, please leave parcel behind rhododendron. If storm hits and rhododendron blows away, please leave parcel inside wheelie bin with brick on top. If crying baby can be heard on approach, tap 3 times on bottom left panel of shed window, do not ring doorbell. If rainbow windmill spins slower than usual, open phone and call alcoholic father. If rainbow windmill stops spinning at any moment, come back in month with picture of alcoholic father eating fish and chips in park. If phone rings out, wait for nesting swallows to return from Africa, then call again. Do not mention alcoholic father to friends, colleagues, woman you love. Do not kiss woman you love. Do not eat, sleep, shit, watch TV until alcoholic father is spotted, leaving Tesco with Guinness and hula hoops. Do not, I repeat, do not drive to 24-hour Shell garage. Spend following afternoon outside alcoholic father's flat. Old ladies watching, bay windows blue with countdown. So, yes, this poem I'm going to read now. So, I wrote this poem when I had just moved to London. So I had been working as a postie for a while, and then I moved to London, and I was unemployed for a while, and then I got a job. And on my first day in the office, I was eating my lunch in like the communal area, and there was a game of tennis going on a TV, and I was watching the game of tennis, and I started writing this poem in my head. It's called The Children. On the muted screen, a ball lands one side of a line, and this means that a person has won. The camera jiggles, zooms out, refocuses on a crowd who are cheering, which means that a person has won. Yes, clapping, back smacking, drink dropping, all signifies that, yep, a ball has landed one side of a line, one side, not one side, but one side, of course, right, because a person has won. A ball has landed. People are happy. And although this is not a metaphor for grief, I cannot deny that a ball, not a ball, but the ball has landed, is landing, will land until it stops being a ball and starts being, until it stops being the ball and starts being a ball at the edge of a roofless room. Lots of people are jumping around inside of. Lots of sound, lots of screens, lots of open sky. And did I mention my dad has taken a shotgun to a field and I haven't realized because I am watching tennis, which means my dad has decided, is deciding, will decide to become not a dad, but the dad, is asking a man for a shotgun, is saying, can I buy? Yes, bring me this much. And it's a man from the pub, someone I'll walk past for years, which means I am existing in relation to this moment. My sister is eating a chalk ice, romping around the garden, holding a toad in relation to this pocket of time. My mum zipping up our puffer jackets, pulling down our hoods while my dad walks through rain to an ATM, leaves a room with a shotgun in a duffel bag. This moment almost encased in glass, this skyscraper I am not really watching tennis inside of, not on my lunch break, not 26, but 9 years old, being pulled out of maths. My sister, 4 whole years, barely taller than a table, and we are not children anymore, but the children, those children, that child. So I'm going to read a short poem now to finish. I don't normally read this poem at readings because it's very sad, but like all my poems are sad, and also you guys have to deal with it. I'm feeling quite brave right now, so I'm just going to read the poem. You're here, I'm here, let's just ride this into the rocks and go for it. So this is my unapologetic sad poem. It's called There's a Person Reflected on the TV Calling Their Dad. The seagulls are circling, calling their dads. The rain is calling its dad, and so is the sun and what's left of the lawn. A skyscraper is kneeling and calling its dad. A bus, a train, a city is calling its dad. The mouth of an underground station opening. Halloween has called. Christmas will call soon enough. And that new year, climbing over the back wall through the screen door is, of course, calling its dad. I stand in a room and call my dad. Tell his answer machine not to worry anymore, that they have found his body. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe Carrick-Varty. One of the best signs I ever saw on a door was in Huddersfield. It just said, "This is not the other door." Well, that's probably true. Perhaps it was the other door. I don't know. I didn't check. People can see me on the big screen. No, I've got a little mark on my suit. I don't know what happened. I kind of spilt something on it weeks ago, and I've been trying to rub it off, and it won't come off. And it struck me that maybe that is what poetry is. Something that you can't rub off. They call them earworms, don't they? Things that stay in your head, or things that stay on your suit, metaphorically. And Fran Lock's poems are like that. When you read Fran Lock's poems, they stay with you for such a long time. I'm not suggesting you'd want to wipe them off. You'd want to leave them there and let them grow. I imagine this stain might grow into a kind of sunflower. And that's the same with Fran's poems. You take your time with them and they grow. I'm sure the book, when I first read it, wasn't this long. But the more you read it in a wonderful, magical way, the longer it gets. And it feels like each word in the book has been weighed by hand for value. Wonderful phrases in this book. The musky bravado of closing time. Is that a wonderful bunch of words? Words, a jagged and sallying truth. You'd be bored to pleats. Isn't that what poetry does? It pushes words together and sparks fly and things happen in these poems. So by the time Fran has read her poems, her book will be even longer in a great way. Fran Lock.
This is for Roddy. Heiner in her human form attends a funeral. There was, of course, his mimsy girl, apt witch with her spread of gossamer divinings, not me. Or again the brilliant friend, her dear face caught like a wasp in a cobweb. Boys with staunch lusts mizzled into anecdote, eminent dresses, all eyes drawn into the orbit of their wardrobes. There were smugglers of honey, doomed ones lost in the errand of their jeopardy. I was not afraid. Beneath their clothes, they're pink like links of sausage. Look away, look again. In the albinizing light before the storm, I'm there, smelling of creosote and spent pleasure. Tawny sardonicus, writhing in the grim heat of my rictus jeans. I am always there, jaw-jacked and bleakly glitching, a baddie's cackle, the zip on a vampire's dress drawn down at zinging speed, my laugh, my lips ripped back to their sateen lining. This deviant seam, wind change artist. Neither cat nor dog, but oh, I've hung his name from my mouth in reddish shreds, this tongue a flag I've flown from mildewed ramparts. Sweet girls he had who filed their teeth and took their meds, and me, convulsing and whooping without joy. Look away, look again. I have turned my face to the wall. La Jenna de Londra, that's the hyenas of London to you. That the red-eyed hyena padding dust on a trail has a conscience that swings between 0 and 0. Roddy Lumsden. But perhaps you are mistaken. This meat, inscrutable ruby salvo, as for you. For all things trounced and then devoured, the high wire stretch from mayhem to amends. The bluesy prowl between whiskey promise, smouldering ploy, the gonzo ballads of your friends, La Dolce Mort, such sultry treatment from a reckless girl her tenement treacle's quicksand sought, but she preferred those jesting boys to the roomy diamonds you had bought. For every gaff and every chance, for every straying article of fate, for skipping needles, quibbled luck, the bruising taste of Saskatchewan pork, for every Baroque marinade that did you wrong. This meat is for you. There's sympathetic magic in a smacked lip. The saints may lisp their miracles, the lilies wilt, the truculent young forget. But hyena is here, in her fatalist May, in her coif of thorns, and bringing offals red and soft and wet enough to cleanse. Be sated, sit, as if never a grim shilling bent in the slot, or the brazen ablutions of suicide, no crackalour of night or mine, no stinging shot of glycerite, when all you need's the inky sluice of cassis or colour. No mirthless slur, no lank malarial hour of woe, and you, standing matador before the night bus, sow your brassy hymns in the AM's meanest acre. Hyena is here, will race her russet flecks to dust, brings scents of musky meadow gas, befitful eccentricity of sky. This meat sees you pirouette and dive. Some kelpie morning with the wind in your teeth, and far from here, no book of going forth by day, and far from here to sway upon some flinty scarp, tarrying and vandal. This awful city has no natives, numbing strangeness suck. But this, a court in open fields, I carried it home for you, dear heart. Eat, dear heart, be resolute and wild. It's called Bone Breakers, or a lovely wee poem about some flowers. Up, through heather up, through widgeon weed and ditch grass scenting air, the midges and the millwakes. Ours are not your postcard passages meekly clovered, ours are gorse-bedraggled stalks of red shank, frayed chantilly, wreck of fools, parsley sparsely clinging up. Through agrimony, hemp and keck, the dock leaves and the sorrels, till Joe says, look. Below us dogs are living wrinkles in the mist, caravans are longboats, churches remember their galleon past, drag broken keels against their graveyards up, until the town spreads silence and distance makes a desert of our enemies, till houses decimated by malarkey darken, grow grand in silhouette. And on the plateau we find them, little pyrite argonauts fronting with the pluck of drunks, equally smote and gold. Old folks mistook them for poison. Greek myth had them spread in lush proletarian meadows where common and displaced dead up. Joe said they eat the heart entire, make words a bitter picnic of exile and of fire. I don't know what he means, the air is sweet, bloody liar, our asphodels nod in the milky heat. Last one, we got through it, didn't we? This is Hibernia. After I'm Back Again by Roddy Lumsden. I shall not meet you now. In the have-not monologues of border towns, their brooding teacher elocutions. I shall not meet you here. Streets with a wending fetish, their pens and vennels, alleyways and wines. I shall not meet you, stretching out a hand, the wetted lead of Mansa's terraces pent beneath the sediment of sky. No feldspar, not pyrate's pale satiric shine. I shall not meet you. In the salt secessions of stinted rooms, the vinegar allegiances of lairds, chieftains, cabinet of arrowheads, winter's brassic anarchy of ramparts, the treachery of thresholds, anywhere a tattooed ankle snaps. Never there the lime pit, in the loam pit, on tides of cockle-picking trespass past the picket at the limit of the commons, I shall not meet you. Scrape the guilt from your omissions with a nail, less by the creels, least by the kerns, once in a conch, yes, one time inside the testy sowing of the sea. I shall not hear you, troubadour, you coroner of sighs. I will not hear you, Gaul and Gaul, your coronet, your keen. I will not meet you now where scented candles waft their gimmicky fluorescence, needle-called exemplum, Ada cloth and evenweave, cordwood, cordwain, penny rags and skeins, the scent of spurious orchids. You will not come. The church in its pensive reliquies, peacock curriculum of saints, Christ with pontil marks for eyes. You will not come across. Between him and real is a long way down. No hand raised to quell the cooing collar doves, to strip the girl in cotton socks of all her blousy billy-do. You will not come across the pillars of your pillow talk, a God and God and God, even the dogs spayed and staunchly moralizing. I will not meet you in the oven-ready glow of my grandmother's kitchen, licking the mineral grist from a spoon, how your porridge tends towards entropy. Perseverances and tantrums with a mouth like puckered wool, compline, pine, complain, vulgate, nook, Dominis and Jim Reeves singing a Nashville Danny Boy. We shall not meet to pass the static charge from paisley pattern carpets to the backs of bare knees waiting. Night is paschal, shellac, partial, amber tumblers full of bells. The night is culprit and fumbling. Night near the quarry on sodden allotments, warrens wrecks the edge of the world, where we will never wear ourselves to water, not with all our doubling back, and shall not climb the scarp, the bray. We shall not spit from scaffolds, sell neither the wanting heart nor the wondering hand for scrap. I shall not meet you in the witching hour for touts and shades, for the grass going forth like an amateur fetch on his belly in the dark. I shall not meet you dawdling through the lawless park and catch your eye. But I have traced the tailbone of my wonderland beneath the itching skin of yours. Times before I caught you with a ruddied look. It's in you too, for all our years of sly unschooling. I am still the full moon's biddy, and you are secret king of screed. Thanks very much.
I think you'd agree what a first half we're having. What wonderful language, what wonderful use of language, and people who've worked so hard with language. And it's great to, I say this most years, but the quality of listening in this room is wonderful. It really is, honestly. It's great listening, great listening. People often disparage books of poetry, don't they, as slim volumes, but I think of these more as kind of small boats of poetry that won't stop coming, that will keep on coming. And decades ago, I used to run a writing workshop in a little community centre in Rotherham. And every week, a man called Trevor would come, and he never brought any poems, but when it came to his term, he'd go, "Yes, Ian lad, but what is poetry? What is it? What is it, Ian lad? Poetry." And I wish, ever since then I've called it the Trevor question. I said, yes, the Trevor question. What is poetry? And I wish Kit Fan could have come to that workshop, because he would have told him, because that's a question that's relevant to Kit Fan's poetry. You know, it shapeshifts. It's a book in which poetry is so many things. It pushes at the edge of language. It waves, in a way, from the centre of language. And then it uses language to kind of heroically, I think, describe and analyse things that seem to be beyond language. And I wish I could have shown this book to Trevor, and then he would have known that actually when you read Kit Fan's book, it's like when you went from dial-up to broadband, and suddenly everything became clear in a really, really fascinating an interesting way. Kit Fan.
Thank you, Ian, for making me feel so good. I like being broadband. And hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Do you believe that Hokusai, the Japanese painter and printmaker, had over 30 pseudonyms, and he moved house over 93 times during his life? I think this story is too good to be false. He was struck by lightning at the age of 50, but somehow he survived it, and since then, his art really flourished. Whatever it was, in those towering storm clouds we can now call cumulonimbus, I want that. Cumulonimbus. Halfway through my life, the reeds by Margaru River, where the ducks made love, stop whistling. I fear I've over-inked, or the linseed oil soured the sky. The wind tastes of oysters grilled over autumn soil. A fish draws a ripple, or did the raindrop win? My papers will topple the house before the tin roof falls. I better make haste and find a new address. A long-legged fly by the watercress skates upstream, brazen-faced. What I need now to change the half course of my life is to be struck by lightning and survive it like Hokusai. Docetaxel, one of the most powerful chemotherapy drugs on this planet, is made from the needles of yew trees. You walk into the dark heart of the yew to stop the cells from dividing like the dew. The yew walks intravenously into you, tightening the microtubules like a screw, and all your internal scaffolding, once alive and a screw, turns rigid, indivisible. It's the body's haiku to rot and blossom, overthrowing us in a coup that ends in soil or fire. You walk into the yew for a second chance, for an alternative avenue. And the yew walks soundlessly into you as your hair thins out, muscles soften to tofu, and your lips turn metallic blue. Soon we'll walk together to Peru or Timbuktu, but first you must walk alone in the mind of the yew. The next poem was written in 2020 after the rice bread protests in Hong Kong, where I was born, and after the Chinese government introduced the national security law, which continues to minimize the civil liberty of citizens in my home city. This poem is called Mother's Ink. Mother's ink. Somewhere in the prehistory of ink is reproduction. Katrina O'Reilly. Born, I was and wasn't. She drew breath from the breath she'd lost to phantom explosions inside her. 3 days, 3 nights, all breaths, and no food or sleep. What other mothers had done, she did, restaging the contractions inside her until my departure. I saw what she saw, a cloud of messy flesh waiting at the gate, redder than ink. The hard plastic on the suction cap, my misshapen head. What she remembered, I remembered. A cloudless day at 3 p.m., and no ink was spilled as she kept herself to herself. Now and then, words escaped from her bleached hands. She knew I wanted ink greedily. She fed it to me, dark milk diluted with water that, when it touched a page, spread. She knew it came from the clouds hiding the tear gas and bullets. She only wanted good ink for me, but feared what it meant. I wanted just ink for her. I wanted ink more than her. The artist and gay activist Derek Jarman lived very near nuclear power station, and I'm going to finish my reading with this poem, which is really about his garden. Derek Jarman's garden. You dwelled in impossibility. First, the waves spoke Shingolese, but the shingle didn't sing in a single tongue. It clicked like dice rolling in cupped hands. It hummed like the uranium in Dungeness. Then the moon fought for every speck, every freckle, dimple, pimple, every facial expression of the shingle lost to the sun's daily repossession. But the moon was the most loved anthology of repeatable failures. The simple equation was not time times labor equals growth. Take the troubled dog rose pressed against the flint, betting its spiky luck on a bank that catches a leeward damp. Take the almond white slow flowers devoured in a good year by brown-tailed moths. For some, home is less bothersome when they cease to root in one place. Say the dandelions you were frightened of as a child, or the sea kale with its psychedelic blue, violet, orange, green, red, indigo, yellow. It even has white flowers, spreading promiscuously, delicious, though radioactive. As to form, structure, and instruments, here the old handle of your rake, and there the wires you sculpted. They, too, are infectious, like the music of rust. That prompt metallic tick-tock ruling over us busy old fools, as our bodies yellow slowly but surely, like mold, lichen, pollen, in this unlikely land where knowledge is not concentrated in a single tree, but disseminated to every neighborly shape and shade. Your black-washed, cladded fisherman's hut of superior doors and numerous windows. Your bright ochre window frames filter the heat of sunflowers. Night wind off the sea. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kit. I've just heard from the live stream people, but some hipsters have actually booked a space under the stage, and they're enjoying the feeling of actually having us walking across their heads whilst listening to the verse and trying to guess, because they can't hear what we're saying, trying to guess which poet is reading through their walk across the stage. That's not true, of course. I made that up, but wouldn't it be interesting? We could try that next year, I think. You saw me earlier on that little film talking about the bus, reading poems on the bus. I often read poems on the bus, partly, I've got to admit, because I want people to look at these books and say, what are you reading? What are you reading, mate? And I can show them, and they might go out and buy it. And then, this is true, this is actually true. A really astonishing thing happened when I was on a bus and I was reading Jason Allen-Paisant's fantastic book, Self-Portrait as Othello. It was a full bus, tea time, and a fella sat next to me. And I thought he was going to ask me about the book, so I had it kind of front open. And he didn't, and I started reading it, and it became honestly, a very moving thing, because he leaned over, like when you fall asleep on the bus and somebody leans on you. He was doing that, and he was reading the words slowly, kind of sotto voce, to himself, so not to the bus, not trying to show off. And I found it was so moving. It was kind of like I was being mirrored as I read the book. And he was just going, how could I resurrect you to speak? He'd not read the book before. He'd not seen it before, I guess. He didn't know Jason's work. But I just found that a profound thing. Then his earring fell off. That was a joke about the cup falling. And it moved me so much. And I thought, I hope the fella goes home and buys the book and relishes it, because it is a book to relish. And I talked earlier about the Trevor question, what is poetry? And this book asks so many questions. Who can feel comfortable in a poem? Who can have poems written about them? In what voice do we say the poem? In what language do we say the poem? Who can find themselves within the frame of a picture? All these questions are asked and not answered in a great way in this fantastic book. Please welcome Jason Allen-Paisant.
So nice to see everybody. Thanks again. Well, so nice to see everybody. You look great. What Shakespeare did not write about, the story he was unable to tell. Othello is a real structure of feeling taking shape, which the world had never known. How could it have? The world was not yet world. When he wrote Othello, the slave trade had been happening for 7 decades with the Pope's blessing. I'm haunted as much by the character Othello as by the silences in the story. Othello the Moor. It was the tax raised from the church in the name of Ferdinand's and Isabella's just and holy war against the kingdom of Granada and Islam that financed Columbus's first voyage to the Americas. 5 centuries later, why does Othello offer up so easy a template for this precarity, for this endless negotiation? Texte, mon cœur. Why does it offer up so easy a template for the shame produced in my body? I'm going to Paris, Mama, and I cannot sleep tonight watching the stars. Night comes untying the cords of my tongue. Rabashundai, the secret place, the void, the bush. Shallah ma shundai. I give myself over to a shout, blooming in pain. Rabashundai, the secret place, the bush of Babel. I started speaking French at 13. I pronounced every sound perfectly. The vowels rolled off my tongue and I was untied and I soared away from my body. And in the bush, my mother, she couldn't find me. In the bush, I had a part fit for me. In the bush, shooting bird and going river, something seized me. And every day was a day of Pentecost. My vowels, how they wrapped their arms around me. I'm going to Paris at last, Mama's grandson, and I cannot sleep tonight, watching the stars. Pas de Calais, plumes against my skin. Will I learn to speak here, a tongue of loss and forsaking? My mother and father left me, and Mama took me in. The varnish of the fields, a lynx at my heels, nowhere. And then, fourmillante cité beside me, Paris, tout d'un coup. I take up my room at the École Normale. I speak the language, but the space don't know my body. A room on the 3rd floor of the internat, 10 square meters, a landscape of speaking voices, nobody in sight, presence of mold in the ceiling, words, incandescent, fine sablure d'un rêve, fleur du mal, flowers blooming in the dark. A damp floor on the 3rd floor, a damp room on the 3rd floor, École Normale Supérieure. No sound in that hallway, but in my blood, how lonely, how sharply loneliness cuts the body. My woman walks so dirgefully beside me. I will always be a stranger here. The thing is, the bloody thing is, I didn't know it, didn't realize that black was a different language, that poor porous was a different language, that no picket fence, no paper on papa was a different language, that going to the theater every other night, going broke was my new language, to act bourgeois and find my bourgeois style. The plush-carpeted Comédie Française, salle Pleyel for music, opera, and theatre. No heads like mine to watch Phèdre die. Only one black man in the room who rises from the orchestra to salute me, fist bump in air. One other black man in the room speaks my language, the language of performer to crowd. And wow, did they like it? The looks. Trying to find whiteness in my blackness. Come on, brethren, my Jamaican brother says to me. Black people don't go opera. You know this. I call you Daddy, bois d'ébène, pieces of scattered wood. You break me into 1,000,000 parts and everything I am is you. I wander in search of you, a trunk of tree reaching my eye, faint in the fat of fog. Mon passé est là, qui me montre et me dérobe son visage. Blurred and calm, it stands there between retreat and outline, face keen to speak. Mon avenir est là, qui me tend la main. I try to touch you, the space between outer space and inner music. disappeared and blasted pieces to the east and west, to the north and south. I go in search of you, to touch, to speak, sounds of stars, of space, daddy, daddy, in a soul case. Self-portrait as Othello, 2. The black body is signed as physically and psychically open space, a space not simply owned by those who embody it, but constructed and occupied by other embodiments. There's a playing around in it. Dion Brandt, a map to the door of no return. You left home for a wandering lust, for pain had driven you to the edge of yourself. And wanting to open the windows of life, you decided to migrate to this country. You came for a different sound, the quaintness of gestures, of faces and food. New tongues are something like trophies, facha, faces, facade. The facade hides things. You like this. Each new word an erotic death. Your language grows with buried things. What does it mean to be far more fair than black? Education, speech, dress, learning. You have the brawn of an intellectual rude boy, sturdier in brain work than in war. No streets and levity, talk Shakespeare, Dante, and Nietzsche, talk sound system. What actually is the language of where you're from? It's that familiarity with rough life, that eye of struggle, that smell of fight, hardness of speech, a coming up vibe, Oxford and all that she likes. So invites you to visit at Christmas, 3 whole days with family and one party to the next. But they think it's going to pass, this fascination with the dark-skinned boy. Surely she'll come around, find someone of her kind when she is sated. A short poem to end. Jamaica, above all, taste of accent, taste of red village in bauxite dirt, taste of soapsud drying on limestone rock, above all, taste of things sun boils away. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jason. That ends our first half. There'll be a short interval now. The books are on sale. We'll be back very shortly. Before we go, one round of applause for our fantastic signers. As you'll see, I've changed my shirt for the second half, like club turns do, because in fact what I've done is I've redrafted my shirt. I made it a different kind of shirt, because I think that's what poets we should do. We should redraft our clothing at any possible opportunity. Sadly to say, after all my hilarious gags about the live stream, it's not working. They're all sitting at home watching the T.S. Eliot Prize equivalent of the test card, i.e. Thomas Stearns Eliot sat there with his legs crossed and his glasses on. They've watched it for half an hour. They're going to keep watching it. It might suddenly leap into life, but they won't know that I've changed my shirt, will they? Apparently, they can watch it at a later date, so that's all right. Our first reader in the second half, Sharon Olds, can't be with us, so she's going to be on video. We hope, yes, but not live. In the first poem in the book, Sharon Olds asks, how much difference is there anymore between me and a cadaver? And the answer is, of course, plenty. Sharon Olds has been writing for many, many years, and she's a great poet of the body and of the ageing body and of the sensual body and of the sensual body as it ages. And somehow she writes from within. She writes from the body. There are quite a few poems in the centre of her new book, Ballads, that are from Emily Dickinson's house, mirroring the way that Emily Dickinson writes, and somehow you get the sense. I never noticed it before, to be honest, when she started writing these Emily Dickinson-tinged poems, that actually, throughout her long career, that Emily Dickinson has been looking over Sharon Olds' shoulder and kind of informing the way she writes. So, as they say on shiny floor shows, run VT.
I thought I would begin by saying that it's an honor and a privilege to be here with this group of poets. I thought I would read the first poem in Ballads and later the middle and the last one. Quarantine morning. Climbing the stairs slowly on my palms and soles, bent forward far, I see my shins closer than usual, their indigo and violet fireworks, their royal blue wormholes. How much difference is there anymore between me and a cadaver? I know I won't come after I'm dead, though it does seem a little strange to me, and strange that what we learned in 7th grade health is not a structural part of each of us like heartbeat and breath, though sometimes people die of a heart attack in bed. I think my mother's father did with his mistress. Then they said to his wife he had fallen down the cellar stairs that weren't there. I told my son that in his late 40s when he said I never told him anything about my family. And he said, "What did they do then, throw him down the cellar stairs?" This morning, in a dream, his father came into a restaurant. I was waiting on the banquette, and I saw him at a distance, taller than everyone, and with that light in the air around his face I had seen sometimes when I'd arrived late to meet him. It was not his whiteness. I had seen it around my boyfriend's face in high school. With Joey, I thought it was genius, inspiration almost like possession, and I think it was. With my ex, I thought it was goodness, but I think it was sexual liking, and the illusion his tolerance for me would be lifelong. I don't remember the last time we made love before I moved into the living room when I understood he was really going to leave me. I didn't know it was the last time, but it was like all the other times, complete and wrenching, though I think I said after the series of orgasms, "One more," and did he kiss me, or smile, or grunt, and I came again, although I was dead. This book has ballads in it in honor of Emily Dickinson, and I have come to feel that her ballads are a little bit bebop. Amherst Ballad 10. When I came to Emily's house late, I remembered the feel of my rough, porous presence in my life, my spirit accidental, chancy-ish. In my mother's garden, I danced with cabbage, roses, and peonies, hollyhock, and snapdragons hid fairies, like the sweet agony of the wings between a girl's legs. Though I did not think flight would be granted to me, or eggs, or milk, or the knot of a pen and ink rosette one could make like a silk coat's frog, then its panels undo, and slip off satin covering, and be one's soul. Komodo. When I saw on the floor, back in the unlighted pantry, the forgotten trap, with a scribble of small mammal under it, maybe smallest mammal, bumblebee bat, pocket monkey, pygmy jerboa, Etruscan shrew, hog-nosed bat. I said to myself, I'll empty it tomorrow, open the plastic jaws and drop the little steaks and chops with limbs onto a piece of tinfoil on the carriage stone. The next day, the day after, by the time I carried it outside, my tremor wiggled it as if it were struggling, and the mouse was caught in 2 traps, like a Valentine heart. So I lowered it into a bucket and put it on the porch step, and it rained more, so I opened the traps and dropped the carousel of worms in the woods, the biggest larva the length of the mouseling's head. In quarantine, isolation, I'd had a thought of you, my darling, and backed up from the thought. If our corpses attracted necromancers of comparable size to the mouses, my love would have a Komodo dragon in his grave with him. Oh, my darling, forgive me. Are you a skeleton yet? 28 weeks, someone said, when it's above freezing. When you died, you arrived at the feast table and your throne, and after the banquet, we went to your 4-poster bed, each post a tree, oak, beech, hemlock, pine, and have been resting together at the end of the festival. What's strange to me this morning is that I think you still love me, even though I've written this. Love is the love of who we are. It is a form of knowing.
Thank you very much to Sharon Olds. It's kind of disconcerting she can get more laughs on film than most of us can standing here. That's the power of Sharon Olds, I think you'll agree. When I'm thinking of how to introduce these books, as I've said before many times, the reason I do it in this way is that we've all been to those events where all the presenter does is just read out a list of what the person they're about to hear has written and the prizes they've won. And in the end, you can get that from the internet or from the back of the book. And what we try and do here at the T.S. Eliot readings is give a human reaction to the books, because we've got a room full of humans here who are reacting to the books. And what I love about this audience is that each of us has a separate and different reaction to the books. And so I sometimes just try and find a quote, not necessarily from the book in question, but from another book that can illuminate something for me that can make me think about the book. And with Abigail Parry's book, I Think We're Alone Now, I was looking at a quote of Walter Benjamin, and he said, translation as a form of creative echoing. And I thought, all right, if we lose that word translation and just say poetry, poetry as a form of creative echoing. So that what Abigail does is go into experience, go into life, go into visualizing things, and does it as a kind of creative echoing, which means to me that somehow, although I'm not her and I haven't experienced the things that she writes about, that somehow they echo and I echo them as I read them. Abigail used to be a toy maker in an earlier life. And that's not to suggest that her poems are toys, but they are intricately made things. In a sense, they are automata with souls that somehow, as you hear them move, they do have some kind of echo, definitely. They echo in you and they echo in themselves. Abigail Parry.
In the dream of the cold restaurant, man with the buttonhole and broad lapels is folding and refolding a white napkin. Look, say his hands at intervals. A swan, a dancing girl, an intricate scale model of the Morn Library on Chancery Lane. The man adjusts his buttonhole and coughs as each one fails precisely to entertain. A waitress intervenes, bringing 2 plates. Fluted, plain, translucent, and quite empty. Such is the gaunt extravagance of dreams. That waitress, though, all elbows, wrists, and hips. A strip of exposed skin reveals a scar on the nub of bone that finishes the spine. No, not a scar. A burn. A full-blown wet rosette, just like the one you earned at 17 from a jig on a nylon carpet. A carpet not unlike this carpet here, lalling its beige hoops and braids around the table's feet. Meanwhile, on the mezzanine, someone lifts a book and reads the line, "He left his knee exposed and dreamed of travelling on a mail coach by night." Or quite. When you offer up your plate, it turns beneath your hands to a crumpled swan. The man, of course, has gone. Such is the glib economy of dreams. So find a way to bear it, if you can. The man who folds and cannot please. The cheap carpet telling its idiot riddle. The girl who has not learned to move between compassion and contempt. But then other people's dreams are very dull, as the waitress knows with all the brutal certainty of being 17. And she's gone too. She'll pull this city to the ground before she'll take your plate, let alone your pity. I don't think I have anything to offer by way of a fluent or clever segue between that poem and the next poem, except to say that this very precise scenario is almost indistinguishable from one of my own anxiety dreams, because there are like 2,000 of you there, and I am about to read a poem titled Speculum. If you do not know what a speculum is, it is a kind of gynecological crank. It works a little bit like the jack on a car, but it is used for much more intimate procedures. I have no idea what kind of masochist does this, but speculum. I like the word. How pert it is. Inquisitive. Part instrument, part clockwork bird. The kind that says, ho-hum, and clicks and squeaks in all its joints. A whimsical professor, beaked and blinking. Let's take a look then, shall we? In the Vulgate, it's a mirror. Videmus nunc per speculum. Only later on are we through a glass and darkly. An odd phrase, that. A pane of sullen blue behind each eye. You don't look through a mirror. You go not till I set you up a glass where you may see the inmost part of you. That's Hamlet to his mother. In a sec, He'll get all weird about her bed and stick his sword straight through an arras. As for me, I find it strange to speak in one breath of one's conscience and one's cunnus. Hard to know thyself when for years the only way was with a mirror tilted up. For a long time, I believed it was an absence, blank, negative, the lab could not develop, an ellipsis. Imagine my surprise to find the way extended upwards, backwards, inwards. All the same, I'm bothered by the rhyme that finds my center in its recess. And yes, I find it tiresome to be arriving in my body again and again each time we talk of what is intimate. No way back now to the place where we first looked in a mirror and cringed into our borders, turning inwards. But I want a better metaphor than this dull fuss of sloven pinks or a room partitioned off. Like Alice in the sequel, slipping through to find everything she knows inverted on its axis and nonsensical. I'm going to end on a short one. Necessarily short because it was written to meet a challenge, and a challenge that I did in fact find quite challenging. A friend of mine challenged me to write just a straight-up love poem. In fact, the way that he put it was, "You are incapable of writing a straight-up love poem." So the challenge was sincere, heart on sleeve, no bullshit. So this is that poem. The title of the poem is "The Brain of the Rat in Stereotaxic Space." Stereotaxy, if you're not familiar with neural imaging, is a technique for rendering a three-dimensional space, like the brain, in two-dimensional coordinates. It's really romantic. The brain of the rat in stereotaxic space is all laid out on numbered plates, in lilacs, greys, and greens which adumbrate the local function, a riddle flattened out, a knot bisected down the interaural line. The brain of the rat in stereotaxic space admits no trace of all the little rat thoughts, little rat needs that scurry round its maze, just page on numbered page of isthmuses and commissures and junctions and rhombomeres all jigsawed into place. The brain of the rat in stereotaxic space insists the pieces tessellate and nothing else squeaks in. Just fig on numbered fig glossed in 8-point lowercase. The brain of the rat in stereotaxic space invites us to extrapolate and come up with grim stuff. Here's no ghost, no guest, no hidden ace tucked up a sleeve. No sleeve, in fact, just stacks of coloured plates. The brain of the rat in stereotaxic space has something to relate about how late it is, how much has been a waste. Grateful, nonetheless, to have had my time at a kink of neural space that more or less exactly corresponds to that way you had yours. A riddle uttered once between one blank page and the next. And that will do, I think. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Abigail. You'll see that she leaned over to me as she came on and she said, "That stain on your suit's getting bigger," and it made me look. Another thing I do with the books is I try to imagine the poet writing the poems and just where they are. I don't know where they are, but I'm trying to imagine some space where they might be working, whether it's some kind of private space or a public space, or whether they're writing to a notebook. And with Jane Clark, and I may well be completely wrong, I imagine her actually in the open air, in some kind of park, in some kind of maybe wooded area in that park, and she's got a notebook, a big notebook with no lines in it, and she's starting, and the poems are moving across the page, as they often do in early drafts of poems. So there are words here, words there, and they gradually coalesce into a poem. I may be wrong, but that just helps me to think about how Jane writes her poems. The other thing I think about a lot when I'm thinking about the books is just the title. Titles of books and titles of poems, as we know, can often be another line, another free gift. And Jane Clark's book is called A Change in the Air. And you think, yeah, that is not only a great metaphor for what poetry is, it changes the air around us, but also it's a great metaphor for what this book is. It does, it changes the air. There's a lot of air-changing poems in this book, of many kinds, many different forms, but what I think Jane Clark does particularly well is the couplet. She lives so beautifully in the land of the couplet and enlivens it and makes it dance and makes it sing and makes it move through this air, changing it. Maybe that's why I do imagine her sitting outside writing these poems, and that somehow around her she can make these couplets and the other forms she uses change the air around her. So, Jane Clark.
Thanks very much, Ian, and it's a pleasure and a great honour to be here this evening. Dressing my mother for her grandson's wedding. A darker shade of blue than her eyes. The dress has slept for years in the wardrobe, next to the clothes she won't let me give away. She raises her arms for me, though she's forgotten why she can't stay by the fire with her collie. A new pair of tights, an old pair of shoes, softened at the toes and heels. She winces at the touch of the hairbrush. No sign of her pearls. I dredge through photos and medicines on top of the chest of drawers. Find them coiled around her engagement ring. She chooses a scarf, red as her lipstick. I tell her there's a beautiful woman in the mirror. She laughs. I might find a new man at the wedding. And then, in a whisper, "Sorry, Charlie," as if he's with us in their bedroom, listening. A former miner in the lead mines in County Wicklow inspired this poem. He told me that he dreaded the work underground, and it was only the company of the other miners and the pit ponies that made it bearable. Pit ponies of Glendassan, hitched to an 8-hour shift, in breeches, hames, and traces, they follow the miners' carbide lights, halt under hoppers, turn on a threepence, and lean into their collars to pull the 5-wagon train. Low-set cobs from the Curragh, a piebald, and 2 greys. Their hooves fall heavy as hammers on granite. They haul lengths of larch for pit props, pneumatic drills, boxes of gelignite, and from time to time deliver injured men back to daylight. The miners pat their necks in passing and feed them windfall apples, comrades in toil and first to stall, legs locked at a sudden rumbling, a change in the air, or the rush of running water. So in answer to Ian's question, a lot of these poems are written outside, and definitely the inspiration for lots of them comes outside. This was, I was on Achill Island off the west coast of Ireland, walking. I met a fisherman who told me about working in the basking shark fishery when he was young. And I wanted to read this poem tonight because it's a story of near extinction and restoration. And what ecologists are telling us all over the world is that if we just give nature a chance, it does revive. At Perching Harbour, basking sharks, docile as seal pups, harpooned and netted from currachs, were towed one by one to the fishery at the slipway. Fathers and sons sliced off dorsal fins and hacked through blubber to reach oil-filled livers. Sweating in burnhouse heat, they shoveled bleeding flesh into the rendering machine. They couldn't wash the smell from their skin, not if they swam to Inishgalvan at the end of every shift. Year by year, the catch diminished, disappeared. But late last April, old men cheered from the headland and said, "It's as if we've been forgiven." A school of 12 cruised into Keem Bay, moontails swishing, fins proud as yawl sails above the waves. The title of this poem comes from the Irish word spolly, for the small stones that hold a dry stone wall together. Spalls. To help us grow a garden, my mother and father travelled across the Bog of Allen and over the Wicklow Gap. They'd have preferred to drive west to Galway or Mayo. They'd have preferred a husband and children, but their daughter loved a woman. We'd have the table set for breakfast, rashers, black pudding, fried bread and eggs. When the soil had warmed, we unloaded shovels and rakes, buckets of compost, and the rusted iron bar for prizing out rocks. The back seat was thronged with pots of seedlings my mother had nurtured all winter. We worked to her bidding, loosened tangled roots before planting, sow marigolds next to beans, sprinkle Epsom salts around roses. My father took off on his own to spud ragwort or clip a hedge. One day, he spent hours gathering stones of different shapes and sizes. By evening, he'd built us a wall under the holly, held together by gravity and friction, hearted with handfuls of spalls. During lockdown, one of our neighbours in the Wicklow uplands died, and this poem is for him. Shepherd. When he was a boy, these upland fields grew more gorse and rushes than grass. He dug up rocks, shifted stones to ditches and laneways, ploughed hummocks into the ground, harrowed furrows, seeded tilth. We'd meet him on our way up Carrick-Varty. Crouched to a ewe on her rump, he'd be clearing thorns from sore hooves before trimming. He'd pause to lament harsh weather or laugh at lambs nudging each other from hillocks. Was it last year we first saw him sit for a breath, his collie resting her head on his knee? On a midwinter morning, neighbours lined the length of road downhill to the church at Ballinatone. Ewes huddled close in lambing sheds, and through the 5-bar gate to the yard, an easterly wind keens silver. And I'd like to finish my reading this evening with a love poem, June. Because wild rose fills the garden to the sultry scented brim, and hawk moths flock to fuchsia, humming a wordless hymn. Because pipistrelles flicker past, heartbeats on the wing, and tonight's the eve of your birthday, the air warm as your skin. Because it's bright till almost midnight, and the days will be short too soon. Let's stay out here and listen for the wood pigeon's 5-note tune. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. I've been reading Ishion Hutchinson's poems for many years. This is his third collection, and his poems and the books as a whole always move me profoundly. They make me think hard about who I am, about what poetry is, about what poetry can be. And it struck me that actually, when you've read School of Instructions, you think, well, why can't all history books be like this? Why can't all history books be written as long poem sequences? You would learn more. You'd learn more about nuance and about the different, the filigrees of history. So here are the stories of West Indian volunteers in British regiments in the First World War, but it's told in dense and elusive and charged and resonant, authentic layers of language. People know that my favourite word is palimpsest, and there's so many palimpsests of language and thought and ideas in here. And also, what did profoundly move me in the book was the use of numbers. There's long sequence where the numbers are in Roman numerals, that kind of decorous thing that Roman numerals are. And it made me think about numbers and how we present poems as numbers. It made me think about capital letters, the way that some parts of the poems are presented in capitals. There's a lot of numbers within the poems. And honestly, you read this book and it makes you want to learn more about that history, but it makes you want to wish that that history was written in this way, in this voice, and in this style. Ishion Hutchinson.
Thank you very much. To the memory of those West Indian soldiers who fought in British regiments during World War I, especially those who perished in the mud and the sand of the desert during the Middle Eastern campaigns of 1916 to 1918, and to the veterans who returned to their islands to carry on the great work of independence from that country which had first sent them to their pain and death. This poem is engraved especially to the memory of those sons of Portland in eastern Jamaica, where their names are here etched not by devastature, but by investiture to the land and sea where they were born and their blood still echoes. E.M. Abendana, S. Williams, L. Moore, J. Douglas, A.C. Smith, J. Anderson, S. Ming, E. Allen, L. A. Murray, G. Brown, H. Wilson, L. Fowles, P. Brown, F. L. A. Dunn, I. Giscombe, W. Deacon, C. Smith, L. A. Duffus, E. Anderson, H. Finn, W. Fraser, J. Phillips, W. M. Goff, A. Brown, I. Anderson, E. Main, T. Anderson, J. Myrie, N. Allen, T. Williams, D. Dacus, T. B. Keach, J. Mitchell, R. Oakley, J. Nichols, H. Phillips, J. Burrell, R. Roberts, W. Moore, R. Sherwood, H. Burke, C. Skyers, J. T. Williams, A. Weber, W. Williams, A. Moody, E. Ashley, J. Walker, E. Dice. They shoveled the long trenches day and night, frostbitten mud, shell-shock mud, dung heap mud, imperial mud, venereal mud, malaria mud, hunbait mud, mating mud, 1655 mud, white flashes of sharks, Golgotha mud, Chilblain mud, Caliban mud, Cannibal mud, ha 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 mud, Amnesia mud, Drapetomania mud, Lice mud, Pyrexia mud, Exposure mud, Aphasia mud, No man lands is every man's mud, and the smoking flax mud, dysentery mud, septic sore mud, hog pen mud, nephritis mud, constipated mud, fate mud, sandfly fever mud, rat mud, Sheol mud, Hirhashrees mud, Adju mud, Asquith mud, parade mud, scabies mud, mums mud, memra mud, pneumonia mud, menemenetical aparsin mud, civil war mud, and darkness and worms will be their dwelling place mud, Yah's mud, Gog mud, Magog mud, God mud, Canaan the unseen has promised saw mud. They resurrected new counter kingdoms by the arbitrament of the sword mud. The moon was high up in Ramley. The surrounding camps were bombed and machine-gunned by enemy craft that visited nightly. Bell, the old Baccabush shanty shapeshifter, blasting thunderbolts in Ramley. Cooley Royal Rosalie retraced herself to untouchable. The southern eastern sky was a single collapsing star. Rin tin tin tin. He hid in latrine stalls from Ricketts' brain Sadducees on patrols. Nocturnal birds cried out, but only one died because they were hidden in the moon-darkened olive grove of Ramley. Then again at Christmas, the boy's hands were high with the murder of sorrow. He was told to whitewash the long walls of Exodus funeral supplies and services in Anatobe. Heat spangled the seaside as he muttered in acute strangler, "Amen, I was seized. Amen again, I was not seized. Amen, I suffered. Amen again, I did not suffer." While butchery of souls blossomed in the desert, it was pitch dark night in Janash Corner when Godspeed shook his jam jar of fireflies. Blinky blinks burst in occasional sparks like fireworks going off faint and distant north of Gaza. No rest for Rosalie, 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 ever rushing to the biting calls of her name from the ash yard. And this was the month the body of number 2021 Private W. Smart A. Boy was brought in by a party of cyanide police. Camp was surrounded by 2021 sandgrosses that could not be chased away. Number 1391 Private J. Fisher C. Boy died pneumonia. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The battalion-less B-boy enchained for ill Irish. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Number 134 Private A.M. Harper D-boy died pneumonia. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. A-boy proceeded to number 3 School of Military Aeronautics for course in aviation. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Number 6898 Private Ben C. Boy died malaria. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. 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 Thank you.
Ishion Hutchinson, the power of the list and the power of repetition there. And you'll see that he leaned over to me as he came on. He went, "That stain on your suit's getting bigger. It's getting really big now." Another great title, Katie Farris, Standing in the Forest of Being Alive. Fantastic title. Wonderful book. It's a book that has the body as arena. It's an arena for poetry. It's the body as book, the body as collection, the body as stanza. It's about breast cancer, about the recovery from breast cancer. It's about being alive through that. But it's also beautifully about itself. It's about how you write about it. It's kind of, in an odd way, a book of instructions as to how to write about what is happening to the body, so that maybe in years to come we can look at this book and think, yes, that is how we begin to write about ourselves when things happen to us. Which isn't to say that it's a sad book, it's a funny book, it makes you laugh, it makes you think. There's a great line, on page 34, one must train oneself to find in the midst of hell what isn't hell. And that is such a great couple of lines, to find in the midst of hell what isn't hell, which is what so many poets try to do, and what Katie Farris does really well in Standing in the Forest of Being Alive. Katie.
Hello. On my way from my chair to this podium, I had a lot of time to think about my choices in life, and a lot of time to feel incredibly grateful for this night, for all of you, most of whom I can't see, thank God, for the judges, for the T.S. Eliot Foundation, and most of all for this incredible group of poets. And I'm so grateful to have been able to hear every single one of them before it was my turn. So I wrote Standing in the Forest of Being Alive beginning in August 2020 when I was diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 36. And writing the book came very much apace with not just my diagnosis, but the chemotherapy, the surgery, the radiation. And I had a copy of the pamphlet that the book was based on in my hands almost exactly the day that I finished my radiation treatment. So this book is very much of a moment and a time. So I'm going to begin with why write love poetry in a burning world? To train myself to find in the midst of hell what isn't hell. The body bald, cancerous but still beautiful enough to imagine living, the body washing, the body replacing a loose front porch step, the body chewing what it takes to keep a body going. The scene has a tune, a language I can read, a door I cannot close. I stand within its wedge, a shield. Why write love poetry in a burning world? To train myself in the midst of a burning world, to offer poems of love to a burning world. If you can imagine, once upon a time, a long braid about down to my hip or so, the illustration for this poem. In the event of my death, what used to be a rope descending my vertebrae to the basement of my spine grows thin. In solidarity with my first chemotherapy, our cat leaves her whiskers on the hardwood floor. I gather them, each pure white parenthesis, and plant them in the throat of the earth. In quarantine, I learned to trim your barbarian hair. Now it stands always on end, a salute to my superior Barbary skills. In the event of my death, promise you will find my heavy braid and bury it. I will need a rope to let me down into the earth. I've hidden others strategically around the globe, a net to catch my body in its weaving. And now for something completely different. This is called Rachel's Chair. Once, many years ago, we made love at a friend's house. We were overnight guests, not perverts, on the whole. But what I am trying to say is she owned a chair so perfect for lovemaking, we joked about asking to take it home. If I had only known then how rarely we would find such objects, I would have. I've got many brothers, just buckets of brothers everywhere you look, and most of them are in the trades. One makes airplane parts in the graveyard shift at a factory, one's a contractor, and so on. This poem is their favorite in the collection. So this is called Quid Pro Quo, a dedication. You said we could replace our lumpy 20-year-old mattress if I wrote you a poem. So here's your goddamn poem. It's It's a little easier when the room's smaller because you can really see that change of the page. But anyway, it's fine. Finally, and thank you one more time, this poem is called What Would Root? Walking through a cathedral of oak trees and bristlecone pines, scolded by squirrels in their priestly black, their white collars wagging with the force of their scolding, I was struck simultaneously in both eyes by some sort of flying detritus, pollen or seeds, and stopped to lean against a rock to scrub it, I thought, away. It was May, it was May, it was May, and the air was sweet with pine and island mountain lilac. The squirrels, I mentioned them already, etc., and the lizards ran down the spines of rocks like a bad feeling. I could see everything. Red-headed hummingbirds dipped their beaks into the little red hoods of penstemon, and I, a redhead, could hear everything. A red-crested woodpecker who was not offended, I did not know his name. Everything smelled green. It was all green, really. Even the red was anti-green, and though my eyes ached from everything seeing, I could taste the granite in the spring. Oh yes, I drank water from the ground. I was wild even then, though the squirrels scolded me and tried to convince me I was not. Soon I crested a rise. The land spread itself greenly for me, and I wished I had seed to toss into that green just to see what would root. My right eye would not close to this view. Why would it? But when I reached up to touch it, I felt there was a twig emerging and another from my other eye. That they were a part of my body I could not doubt. They were living and enervated and jutting out. I sat down, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck, understanding for the first time they were not hairs, but roots. Everything was everything. The twigs in my eyes tasted sunlight with my mouth, the roots drew the salt from my sweat into their vacuum, and I was no longer hungry. Everything. It was all green. The roots in my skull shifted, and I laid down beneath my own branches. I had to wiggle a bit to find a place to lay my head. The rock was very hard, and I needed softer ground. Yes, a place for the top of my head to come off, to nuzzle into the earth, to drink. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Katie Farris and to all our readers tonight. The readers will be down in the downstairs area to sign their books. The results of the competition are announced tomorrow. You can hear all the poems, or some of the poems from all the poets on my Radio 3 show, The Verb, this Friday night. Let's have a moment of silent appreciation for the people on the live stream who never heard a thing, but never mind. That makes us feel more special because we were here, so that's a good thing. One more round of applause for all the poets and our great sign language interpreters.